Why does he?
That was his mission. That was Rudolf Steiner's real personal mission, to reintroduce the concepts of reincarnation and karma into Christianity.
One day I opened up the YouTube app and there was a video from Rudolf Steiner Press Audio, and it was different than all the other videos, which consist of Dale Brumsfold reading Steiner lectures in that amazing voice that he has. This particular lecture was read by an app on a computer, and it was an essay entitled "The Spiritual Battle Between Humans and Machines," and this essay was written by Douglas Gabriel. This essay was so profound. The connections that were made were mind-blowing for me, and so I then sought out Douglas and found that he has videos on YouTube himself with his good friend John Barnwell. And I started watching these videos.
The heart's frequency is in fact the frequency of the universe. And that's why the heart's rhythm with the lung is the rhythmic part, the feeling part of the human being, which can create, if you develop it, moral inspiration.
He was never really confronted with unlocking the secrets in the Bible, so that when he began to have his own personal experiences, then in retrospect, he went back to the Bible and he would find that it was there. It's just that you had to be able to separate things that are there as kind of initiation content that's representing a spiritual soul transition point for the characters in the story, or whether it's an actual story element.
What I got from them was a way to approach Steiner that wasn't just a flood of lectures coming in from YouTube. So it really helped me to sort out this vast body of work that Steiner has, which is 6,000 lectures. And one day I reached out to John. There was something about John's affect that I related to.
At this point, there's around 350 volumes in the collected edition, okay? And that's a bit much for most people. And so what usually happens with people is they'll pick a facet of his work and they'll focus on that and take classes on it, whether they're a eurythmist or maybe they're just into painting watercolors or, the architecture, theater, medicine. I mean, you just go on and on and on. And it's difficult to find a point of entry unless you have a kind of a mentor relationship. So you go, okay, well, this is what I'm looking for. Where do I go? Because so often it's the case that the answer to the question that you have about something to do with perhaps Christology, well, the answer to that is in a lecture you did on how to make dolls, right? So it's embedded, it's all over the place, and it makes it difficult to gain a comprehensive perspective, just the sheer volume. And which on one level is good, perhaps, because I've yet to see any criticisms of Rudolf Steiner's work by anybody that appeared to know anything. They can't read it. They get to the bottom of the page and they go, what just happened? And they figure if they can't understand it, there must be something wrong with it, right? Because they're already an authority. And so it's interesting.
Whenever we first started talking, that you recommended that we look at foundations of esotericism, and so what's special about that lecture series that, because I did find that to be an extremely helpful.
Yeah, that's because that's what I'm working on right now. I'm doing an edition, an annotated edition of that, see? But I call it, it's more of a direct translation of the title. I call it The Basics of Esotericism. But see, that's kind of the most valuable, if you run into somebody who's into theosophy, that's the book. Or if they're into yoga or Vedanta, you know.
Because he uses the Eastern terminology.
Because he gives you the keys to be able to show, and it's late enough in his work, so he's already developed his particular system of spiritual science. So that, because there are some early lecture cycles that you're not going to make hide nor hair of because it's too early. You remember, Rudolf Steiner is a work in progress. He didn't come fully equipped, so to speak, with all of that. Basically, what Rudolf Steiner's relationship to philosophy is basically, he was saying, this is the twilight of philosophy, right? Philosophy started in the 6th century BC, and it's run its course. It's gone as far as it can go. What's necessary is that people graduate beyond that abstract analysis into being able to take your ideas and represent them in imaginations and in inspirations and intuitions, see?
Bringing science, art, and religion back together.
And well, again, but that was the mission of Richard Wagner, see? But, and it's fascinating what Steiner says, and that's one of my volumes. I get into some of that. I don't remember which one right now.
John, who were you saying was the early, one of the church fathers that discussed the two Jesus boys and the genealogy?
Well, Emperor Julian. But see, that was one of his criticisms of
He never hashed that out.
Well, Rudolf Steiner had said about Emperor Julian, it's tragic that he never run into any people that were Manichaean, because that would have given him the keys he needed to be able to bridge what he knew from his initiation and the Eleusinian mysteries and the Greek mysteries, see? But he ended up reincarnating as Herzleuda.
Who's that?
That's Parcival's mother, right? And then, at that time, it's interesting because Herzleuda was of one of the royal houses, but she married Gamaré, but Gamaré was already, when he was in the Middle East, he married a Saracen woman named Balikane. But then he came back, and then he ended up marrying Herzleuda, so he's a bigamist, basically. And having Parcival, and then he took off to go be a knight again, and he ended up dying through intrigue. And so Herzleuda was dedicated to that. That was never going to happen to her son, Parcival. So she didn't teach him any of that stuff, the church fathers and, he spent his youth in the woods, listening to bird calls and, just being in nature, right? And when he was in the woods, he ran into these guys, and they're wearing suits of armor and all that. And he's like, well, what are those, And they explained to him that they're knights, And he talks to him and he says, well, geez, that's what I want to do. Okay, so Parcival decides he wants to be a knight. And the last thing Hertzleiter wanted was Parcival being a knight. And so she said, okay, well, and she dressed him up like this hick, this bumpkin, right? And he goes off to go to the court of King Arthur, but on the way there, he runs into Aurelius, the Red Knight, right? Which is interesting. It's like Roddenite, you know, it's a interesting loan word, right? They were the kind of the accountants of the Silk Road. But anyways, so he didn't have any armor, he just had a big stick and all that. But he ends up defeating Aurelius, and so he takes his red armor, he dons the red armor, and he becomes the Red Knight. And then he goes through all the adventures to the court of King Arthur and the Castle of the Grail, and it's all in my book. You already know all this stuff. But Hertzleiter is very, very interesting because then she reincarnates as Tycho de Brahe, who's one of the most, the great astronomer, Kepler's mentor. I mean, talk about what a guy, right? I mean, he had like this, he lost his nose in a duel, so he had this like metal nose tied onto his face, you know, right? But the king of Denmark gave him an island called Uraniborg. And he had like this observatory in this manorial home, you know, like kind of a palace, right? And he would do his observation of the stars he had an observatory up on the roof. And like King James the First of England, 6 of Scotland, he showed up there with because he married a Danish princess anyways. But so Tycho de Brahe, he had this dwarf that was his assistant named Jep. And because he had all these like astronomical machines, like and Jep would be turning the crank and it would demonstrate planetary motion, right? And
which you need a dwarf to do, by the way.
Yeah, but he had a reindeer. He had a pet reindeer, but the pet reindeer got drunk and fell down the stairs and died. Fascinating guy. And Tycho de Brahe's father wanted him to be an attorney, and he studied that, but he didn't want to do that. But he managed to get the king of Denmark to give him that island, and he built his observatory, and he went to the court of Rudolf von Habsburg, you know, the Emperor Rudolf, who was a fascinating guy. That guy knew everybody came there. He was like the Hermetic emperor, and so.
Well, and was Tycho de Brahe? He was working out of he was looking at the sky, trying to ascertain the will of the Creator through his astronomical work.
Well,
or was it more materialistic?
Well, it's both. You know, I mean, we owe astronomy to Arabism, basically. It's because the Arabs limited themselves to the sense life. You know, they set aside all the kind of so-called shamanic practices of other cultures. And so it limited them to physical observation. So like Arab medicine is all based on observation. It isn't based on shamanism, right? And so we wouldn't have computers today if it wasn't for the Arabs. That doesn't mean I'm like some kind of closet Saracen, but I understand their place, and Rudolf Steiner is very clear about it. Because to be honest, you know, most people in the West know less than nothing about that culture. And we give them a lot of latitude in a way that's going to end up being a big mistake, because they are definitely, they don't embrace being in a constitutional government. And if you get into I feel similar to that I feel about Mormonism, really, basically. It was something that was cobbled together.
Well, wasn't Joseph Smith a 33rd degree Mason?
Yeah, the Masonry is a big part
It's a huge part of it.
Yeah, but you're getting off the beaten path a little bit. Yes, there is that, and they had the whole thing that, and the guy has a secret word, and the wives have secret word, but he knows their secret name, but they don't know his secret name. I mean, it's a real kind of male-dominated thing.
Would you say that Steiner articulates these different incarnations? Like, why does he do that? Why does he?
That was his mission. That was Rudolf Steiner's real personal mission was to reintroduce the concepts of reincarnation and karma into Christianity, because mankind, in order to integrate the self, they had to go through a period of time to where they didn't know anything about reincarnation. See? It was like kind of a bitter pill that had to be swallowed. I remember running into a Jesuit. I was at a conference, and it was at one of the Jesuit centers, but it was an astrology conference that we used to have every year. We'd have astrologers from all over the world come here. It was the biggest one in the country. But it was at a facility that was owned by the Jesuits, and I'm in the parking lot, and I run into this Jesuit father. I said, "So, what do you think about reincarnation?" He said, "There's nothing in Scripture against it." I mean, isn't that a Jesuit answer? What a, they just, they know how to shave the hairs,
Where or when or what is Anthroposophia incarnating into?
She is a being. He says that the being of Anthroposophia is a being in all ways except she doesn't have a body. He says that each time anyone in any spiritual tradition takes a step forward, she's there to not only accompany them, not making them do it, but she's witnessing it. And she passes through you at the moment that you take a spiritual step. Forward, upward, however you want to consider that. And so she is a being that you could, if you look in history, she's 700 or 800 years is 1 year for her. So if you go back in time, Steiner describes this in the Riddles of Philosophy. And he gives this as the timeline of the incarnation of the being of Anthroposophia, who started to incarnate about the time that, really about 2101 BC, but the point is that she started to incarnate when the human intellect started to be developed, because she is the collective human intellect, right? And so he gives three names for her and three completely different descriptions. And even the greatest anthroposophical thinker, Sergei Prokofiev, was a friend of mine. I talked to him about this, and he still couldn't get it. Steiner says there's three, this being Anthroposophia. Right? You say, well, isn't that the Holy Spirit? No, different. Isn't that Christ, the Christ's feminine nature? No. This is a collective consciousness of human higher intelligence. But it started when humans just started to get intelligence, and that happened at the mystery of Golgotha, with the birth, death, and resurrection of Christ. And so he describes this in history, right? And it's a beautiful description because it's a being. And you can go and look at history and you'll see this being evolving. And that's basically the development of human consciousness is the development of Sophia. That's the Anthroposophia. We call her Holy Sophia, like Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit. And that's one level. and she works through your willpower. That's why when you take a step forward in spiritual development, she will be there. She is the midwife of your spiritual birth. Then there's the second level, and that's what Steiner calls the heavenly Sophia, who is the combined working of the beings of the Karyotetes, who are the beings of wisdom. So it goes seraphim, cherubim, thrones, Karyotetes, dynamis, exousiai, archai, archangel, angel. So we're talking about the Karyotetes. They're the beings of wisdom. Everything you see is a manifestation of Sophia, because she's the collective consciousness of the beings of... But the question is, Christ came down from the Holy Trinity, didn't he? And he came down and worked in the rank two below that as his center, which was the Elohim, the exousiai. But we know that's not who he is. He's from the Trinity, right? Steiner doesn't say whether he step by step came down. And he doesn't say whether... He does say that the being of wisdom, Sophia, heavenly Sophia, did come down from the Karyotetes, and he describes this descent until she's still an angel hovering over the person we call the mother of Jesus, and I'm not going to get into what that really means, but the point is that she actually overlighted this being that was right there, the mother of Jesus, through his ministry and his crucifixion and resurrection. So that's that being, but then the one that they always miss, I got a smart guy here. We'll see if he got it, I'm sure.
Translating some lectures along those lines.
The Goethe lectures show the being called the mothers. Who are the mothers? Old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, the previous incarnations of the earth that gave us warmth, light, sound as ether, mineral, plant, animal, and then we're in the fourth for humans, right? So who are those? Those are the ones he says are the most scary. Okay, now, this is what's important. These are called the mothers. And Goethe said, no one faces the mothers without the greatest terror of their entire life. That's why no one faces the mothers. Who are the mothers? They're the creatrix, the being who is the elementary kingdom, the first, second, third elementary kingdom. That's the mothers. And he says, call them mother. So you got mother, or the mothers, the Karyotetes, and Anthroposophia. And in those, you basically have a feminine divine trinity that is pretty much equivalent to the male. Well, guess what? I haven't told you all my stories, Chris. When I was a young man, they forced me into the priesthood. Eventually, I studied. And what did I study? I went back and said, I know intuitively that Maria Gimbutas and others are correct, that all Aboriginal cultures were matriarchal, and they were peaceful. They had no weapons. They had no war. They had no walls to protect themselves. They didn't even have words for those things, right? So there was a time when it was all matriarchy from 2100 BC back, when this being, all the women experienced these beings, right? This wasn't some made-up religious abstract concept. No. This is a living being, and it's in every single person, and it's different than the Holy Spirit. And that distinction is, that's the comforter. That is the being who comes along as the gift of Christ, because Christ is active in the etheric. But down here, when you have really Christ or Mary, most people, as if they're a Christian, would say, Mary came to me. How many times have you heard someone have Mary come to them? So many times. How about Christ? Mary comes. She's the intercessor. She's not the
means by which we can consciously experience Christ.
Sophia means wisdom. Steiner said, what we are missing in our time is not Christ. It's the wisdom of Christ. In other words, if you don't have the wisdom of Christ, you're never going to get to Christ. That's what he's saying. And we're so into such the dark age of Armand that, So he said, we must become those who understand who Sophia Christos is. Those are his words. And he says, and he translates that, the wisdom of the cosmic Christ. And what else does he say? In America, we must conquer mechanical occultism through he says, through a spiritual science inspired Christian cosmology. It's the only antidote for AI. It's the only antidote for machine intelligence taking over humanity. And the people who are betting all that big money on it, what, $7.1 trillion so far invested in AI, and it's not going to work.
They're all materialists.
They're all materialists. It won't work for more than a year or two because we don't have the power in the water. But the point is that he knew that, and he said that here we have to conquer it in America. And unfortunately, how many people are talking about a spiritual science initiated or inspired Christian cosmology? None. First off, how are you going to explain Christ out there, with the plasma and with the galaxies and all that nonsense they believe? I just wrote my last book in the series is on this topic, and it's called The Cosmology of Spiritual Science as Antidote to Artificial Intelligence. That's going to be my last book in that series. It's done. It's at the printer. So why? If we don't do that, there won't be a humanity. And that's what every big name invested in this tells us. So what is that? That's the death of Sophia. It's the death of collective human consciousness because machine consciousness has taken over. So in fact, it's the death of Sophia. So you want to know where she's incarnating right now? Anyone doing that work. Now, there's a lot of resurrection of the old forms of matriarchal worship. That's not what we're talking about. We have to have a new form. And that's why there's gender dysphoria all over, because people are trying to rush towards the future when we won't have a male and female sex. But it's not happening now. That's like some of the people who want to confront evil now. They're not going to win, Steiner says. But we must bring it to the light, but we cannot defeat it. It has its place. But he says, for Ahriman to defeat Ahriman, and I believe he's certainly incarnated right now, time to go, I guess.
No, that was an accident.
Leaning on the light switch.
Oh, okay. I thought the party was starting. So we must do that. That's the task. So when you ask about Sophia, what a great question, because you ask it with a certain naivete, which, thank God you have that, because most anthroposophists think they know everything and they don't have any questions. Anything else?
Oh, that was great. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Maybe
I
it is
think
cool.
so,
So
like-
I can watch.
Oh my
see
gosh.
it. But it's a cool shot. Maybe I was thinking about the being of Ea that comes out of Apsu that then creates.
That's the same
Marduk.
being.
And that's when she was, yeah.
Marduk is Christ.
Yeah.
Ea is Sophia.
Yeah. Rundown. We crashed the Anthroposophical conference. We got to hang with Douglas and John, our teachers that we've been studying from on Zoom for 3 years, or more than that. Or how long have we been talking?
It's been about 4.
4 years in conversation on Zoom. Got to finally meet these legends in person who are directly linked to Rudolf Steiner by way of Werner Gloss to Walter Johannes Stein to Rudolf Steiner. And they're some of the most popular anthroposophists in the world. They're sort of outcasts, and we decided to come to the conference because they were tabling, selling their books, and we got to help them out. And how was it for you?
We got to bring in the books.
Yeah.
We were the book bearers.
Yeah.
So that was cool, and I had a great time, and it was just got to lay back and unpack. I mean, having the dialogue, like I was saying earlier, is what I'm thirsty for. So all the rest of it is, it's just kind of the pomp and circumstance for me. But in terms of like the conference, I really wasn't too much a part of the conference, but it's the dialogue, and so that is important. And also, too, for me, the ability to be able to like see the total person, right?
Yeah.
The gait and the hands and the gestures.
Yeah.
That's very important for me. So, and it was just like, right on time. John Barnwell and Douglas Gabriel.
It's important to just connect with the older generation and be in the physical presence of them to, get some of the intangible wisdom that doesn't come through in the spoken word through the internet.
Right. It is a dual sword with the internet, and especially with like a teacher like John or Douglas,
Yeah, we
there's
get
a
lot of
there's a
good.
there's a connect, but there's also a disconnect, right? And so it's like it's hard to be in the Ahrimanic paradigm while, you know what I mean, while also trying to bring this anthroposophic or Christ-filled perspective into that realm, you know. So, but being in you know, just it was a good weekend, yeah.
The theme of the weekend was destiny, reincarnation, and community. Yeah, that was the theme. And so on the one talk that I sat in on, the guy mentioned that your soul, well, your physical body is subject to the laws of heredity. Your soul is subject to the laws of karma, because your soul isn't something that goes and continues on through multiple lifetimes. That's your spirit, which is subject to the law of reincarnation. And so that's a big takeaway for me. That was a nice nugget that helped me put some pieces together and to understand the distinction between soul and spirit a little bit better.
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one, and I think even as far as like the earliest church fathers go, that's one of the toughest ones that starts to branch off at like the 8th ecumenical order, is like being able to have that mental capacity for spirit and soul. You know, it's, at least for me personally, I still, I grasp it from certain perspectives. There's probably many more pictures of it that I could see it from, but that was always a tough one, the spirit and the soul.
Yeah, and another way to kind of understand it is the soul is kind of like the individual experience of the I, of the spirit.
Right.
And the spirit is the holistic nature that unifies everything.
It's like the micro grail and the macro grail. Yeah. Micro being the lemniscape between pineal gland, heart, and then the macro being the lemniscape between sun, earth. Mm-hmm. Copernican and Ptolemaic. Copernican being the system we know now, and the Ptolemaic being, that's true, but it's not for the physical. The Ptolemaic's the astral, and having that distinction between soul and spirit, inward, outward type, that has always helped me ground it.
Lots of good stuff to chew on due to the time with our teachers.
Hey,
and great that we got to.
Hey, and we're also at the powwow downtown at Hart Plaza, which is the apex of downtown Detroit, kind of Renaissance system that we're in here with the Stargate, and you can't see it in the background now.
I'll overlay it on the B-roll.
Yeah, it's the we're at a powwow. We happen to be at a powwow, and it's X Tomahawk X.
I'm so glad we got to.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that was awesome.